Currently, Earth. It was February 23rd in the year 1868 that William Edward Burckhardt, or W.E.B. Du Bois, is born in Great Barrington, Massachusetts. A brilliant scholar, Du Bois was an influential proponent of civil rights. Du Bois' childhood was happy, but during adolescence he became aware of a vast veil separating him from his white classmates. He devoted most of his life analyzing Black America's position on a world scale from a sociological point of view. He took his doctorate at Harvard, but was unable to get a job at a major university, despite his impressive academic achievements and the publication of his doctoral thesis about the slave trade to the U.S. in the mid-1800s. He taught at Wilberforce College in Ohio, then spent a year at the University of Pennsylvania, where he wrote his first major book, The Philadelphia Negro, a social study, in 1899. The book was the first sociological case study of a Black community. Du Bois came to national attention with the publication of The Souls of Black Folks in 1903. The book explored the thesis that the central problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. One controversial essay attacked the widely respected Booker T. Washington, founder of Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, which trained Black men in agricultural and industrial skills. Du Bois accused Washington of selling out Black people by advocating silence in civil rights issues in return for vocational training opportunities. In 1909, Du Bois helped found the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. He edited the association's journal, The Crisis, from 1910 to 1934, reaching an audience of more than 100,000 readers. But he resigned after an ideological rift with the group. In 1935, he published Black Reconstruction, a Marxist interpretation of the post-Civil War era. At Atlanta University, where he later taught, he founded a review of race and culture called Phylon in 1940, and the same year published Dusk at Dawn, in which he examined his own career as a case study of race dynamics. He rejoined the NAACP from 1944 to 1948, but broke with the group permanently after a bitter dispute. He joined the Communist Party in 1961 and moved to Ghana, where he became a citizen in 1963, the year of his continuance of eternity. On February 23rd in the year 1945, the U.S. flag was raised on Iwo Jima. During the bloody battle for Iwo Jima, U.S. Marines from the 3rd Platoon, E Company, 2nd Battalion, 28th Regiment of the 5th Division take the crest of Mount Suribachi, the island's highest peak and most strategic position, and raise the U.S. flag. Marine photographer Louis Lowry was with him and recorded the event. Americans fighting for control of Suribachi's slopes cheered the raising of the flag, and several hours later, more Marines headed up the crest with a larger flag. Joe Rosenthal, a photographer with the Associated Press, met them along the way and recorded the raising of the second, along with a Marine still photographer and a motion picture cameraman. Rosenthal took 3 photographs atop Suribachi. The first, which showed 5 Marines and 1 Navy Corps man struggling to hoist the heavy flagpole, became the most reproduced photograph in history and won him a Pulitzer Prize. The accompanying motion picture footage attests to the fact that the picture was not posed. Of the other 2 photos, the second was similar to the first but less affecting, and the third was a group picture of 18 Marines smiling and waving for the camera. Many of these men, including 3 of the Marines seen raising the flag in the famous Rosenthal photo, continued their eternity before the conclusion of the battle for Iwo Jima in late March. In early 1945, U.S. military command sought to gain control of the island of Iwo Jima in advance of the projected aerial campaign against the Japanese home islands. Iwo Jima, a tiny volcanic island located in the Pacific about 700 miles southeast of Japan, was to be a base for fighter aircraft and an emergency landing site for bombers. On February 19th in 1945, after 3 days of heavy naval and aerial bombardment, the first wave of U.S. Marines stormed onto Iwo Jima's inhospitable shores. The Japanese garrison on the island numbered 22,000 heavily entrenched men. Their commander, General Tadamichi Kirabayashi, had been expecting an Allied invasion for months and used the time wisely to construct an intricate and deadly system for underground tunnels, fortifications, and artillery that withstood the initial Allied bombardment. By the evening of the first day, despite incessant mortar fire, 30,000 U.S. Marines, commanded by General Holland Smith, managed to establish a solid beachhead. During the next few days, the Marines advanced inch by inch under heavy fire from Japanese artillery and suffered suicidal charges from the Japanese infantry. While Japanese kamikaze flyers slammed into the Allied naval fleet around Iwo Jima, the Marines on the island continued their bloody advance across the island, responding to Kirabayashi's lethal defenses with remarkable endurance. On February 23rd, the crest of 550-foot Mount Suribachi was taken, and the next day, the slopes of the extinct volcano were secured. By March 3rd, U.S. forces controlled all 3 airfields on the island, and on March 26th, the last Japanese defenders on Iwo Jima were neutralized. It's estimated that 21,800 Japanese defenders continued their eternity, while 200 were captured alive during the specific conflict. There were also more than 6,000 Americans that continued their eternity taking Iwo Jima, and some 17,000 wounded. It was 1954 on February 23rd when a group of children from Arsenal Elementary School in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, received the first injections of the new polio vaccine developed by Dr. Jonas Salk. Though not as devastating as the plague or influenza, poliomyelitis was a highly contagious disease that emerged in terrifying outbreaks and seemed impossible to stop. Attacking the nerve cells and sometimes the central nervous system, polio caused muscle deterioration, paralysis, and even continuance of eternity. Even as medicine vastly improved in the first half of the 20th century in the Western world, polio still struck, affecting mostly children, but sometimes adults as well. The most famous victim of a 1921 outbreak in America was future President FDR, then a young politician. The disease spread quickly, leaving his legs permanently paralyzed. In the late 1940s, the March of Dimes, a grassroots organization founded with President Roosevelt's help to find a way to defend against polio, enlisted Dr. Jonas Salk, head of the virus research lab at the University of Pittsburgh. Salk found that polio had as many as 125 strains of 3 basic types, and that an effective vaccine needed to combat all 3. By growing samples of the polio virus and then deactivating them by adding a chemical called formalin, Salk developed his vaccine, which was able to immunize without infecting the patient. After mass inoculations began in 1954, everyone marveled at the high success rate, some 60 to 70%, until the vaccine caused a sudden outbreak of some 200 cases. After it was determined that the cases were all caused by one faulty batch of the vaccine, production standards were improved, and by August of 1955, some 4 million shots had been given. Cases of polio in the U.S. dropped from 14,647 in 1955 to 5,894 in 1956. And by 1959, some 90 countries were using Salk's vaccine. A later version of the polio vaccine, developed by Albert Sabin, used a weakened form of the live virus and was swallowed instead of injected. It was licensed in 1962 and soon became more popular than Salk's vaccine, as it was cheaper to make and easier for people to take. There is still no cure for polio once it has been contracted, but the use of vaccines has virtually eliminated polio in the U.S. and around the world. According to the World Health Organization, polio cases have been reduced by 99%. But sadly, It survives only among the world's poorest and most marginalized communities. The information documented on this audio file can be verified on history.com.